So when we were talking about it before, and we were saying, oh, the difference between being an empath and having clairsentience, and I was like, oh, that there's a difference. Like I didn't really realize that. I don't know. Maybe I just didn't understand what clairsentience was exactly. Uh, so I'm kind of having a hard time, I guess, differentiating between what is an empath then and what does clairsentience mean, because to me it's kind of the same thing, even though there are different types of empaths, um and what that means to me is just that you would be kind of absorbing the energies of these outside sources. Like if you're a nature empath, for example, um that's where you would go to, rejuvenate yourself, because you're absorbing, the good energies of nature, and it's revitalizing and all these things. Or animals can be very healing, or, it can also have an adverse effect when you're in a large crowd
Right.
and you're absorbing all of the crowd's energies. And so there's a fine line, I guess. I don't know. Maybe
Well, I
you
do
should.
think you're right. And it's a big topic, and empathic comes up when we're talking about clairsentience because I agree with you. I think that the point of an empath is that you spelled it out really well. It's just being extremely sensitive to that type of information, and it comes in the form of feeling. Um,
Right.
so, I mean, I don't see a separation with that either. I think you're right that they're the same. The question is what are you picking up on? Are you picking up on emotions? Are you picking up on the energy? Are you picking up on physical sensations? And that's why I think
Right.
clairsentience is so kind of convoluted and confusing. It's because there's a lot to it, which is why I wanted to talk about what does it look like and what it feels like, because hearing's pretty simple. It's a thought or a sound, right?
Right.
Seeing's pretty simple. It's a visual with your eyes or in your mind. Those are
Right.
really simple, but clairsentience gets really confusing. And I think when we talk about clairsentience, you're right. People say, oh, well, I'm an empath. And I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? Because what's empathic for you is different from this person who's empathic. It's the same thing as saying, what's channeling? Well, I channel a
Right.
spirit, but I channel animals, or I channel the Akashic field. So I think empathic is very much for me just a terminology that says it's a degree of sensitivity. That's how I define an empath. It's a
I could
degree
see
of
that.
sensitivity.
Right.
I utilize clairsentience very much so, but I don't consider myself empathic. So for me, that border of being empathic is when you you it happens to you without your consent. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Right. Right. Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
because I have clairsentience, so am I empathic? Well, I guess so, but ultimately, not really, because I'm able to keep it out. I have enough boundaries and I have the ability to push that away that I
Right.
wouldn't
Or
define
it's you do
myself as
have
an
everyone.
empath.
Everyone should have a degree of empathy, right?
Yeah, but
So,
empathy is not the same as being empathic. That's different.
oh, okay.
Empathy and empathic are, I can have empathy for you, but that's not the same. Empathy is an emotion that we generate to be considerate of someone else, right? We are empathetic to their situation. An empath is a psychic process. Empathy is not psychic.
Right. Okay. Yes. 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 I
Makes
get what you're
sense?
saying.
Empathy
Yeah.
is not psychic. It's simply me having compassion for your situation.
Right.
So that is generated from my ability to be empathetic to your situation. It's a degree
Right.
of compassion. Being empathic is a psychic process that most empaths say they generally, it happens to them so much that it's like they have to learn how to control it. That
Right.
to me is what an empath is. It's a high degree of clairsentience. And as they become more trained, they're able to turn it off, control it, turn it off, turn it on. Does that?
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you're an empath, it's kind of uncontrollable. You get bombarded a lot, and until you can really figure
Right.
out uh, and separate what your feelings are from what somebody else's are, and then you're going to have a hard time dealing with like the
Right.
intensity. It's like an intensity about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah. And so I think you're right. I mean, being an empath and being clairsentient really are kind of the same thing. It's because an empath says, I absorb everything. And generally,
Right.
what you're absorbing from the other person is their feelings, their emotions, what's going on in their life. And it can also happen at the body level, the physical level. I'm taking on the illnesses or the pains of others. That is utilizing clairsentience. But the term empath means that it's overlaying itself on someone so heavily that they're no longer discerning between themselves or the other. Okay.
Right. So when you get like a physical ailment from someone and you're like, man, does your back hurt? Because mine does now all of a sudden, that's like an empathic, but
that would be an
physical
empathic experience.
Aspect.
Yes.
Right.
Now, if I just said to you, oh, your back is hurting you, that's not an empathic experience, because I could be getting that through claircognizance, or I could just be making note of it. That doesn't mean my back is hurting as well. That simply means I am aware that your back is hurting.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like you, well, because like I've done that before where I've like absorbed the pain and then been like, damn, like, or even like after someone's left and been like, ow, So it's like weird.
But you're having the physical experience. You are having the physical experience. You're having the emotional experience. So here's another good example. Spirit shows up in a mediumship reading and they're sad, and I start crying because I cannot control. Now, that doesn't happen very often for me, but you have this
to me ridiculous amount of times.
Exactly. So that would be what I would consider the empath. The experience has moved on to you to the point that it becomes you. You can't detach from that.
Yes.
And so it's a degree, right?
Which is, and I hate crying. So
I try not to do it either. They say it's not the most professional thing to do. Unfortunately, sometimes it happens.
What happens? Yeah, I can't. Oh my God, so many times I've just been like burst into tears, and I don't know how to make it stop necessarily, unless, it's like, unless you really do, you have to back off the energy and just be like, whoa, that's too much.
Right. Yeah, you have to kind of get control of that. And I think that that's, again, when we're talking about an empath, that control aspect is generally very difficult because they're so absorbent, right?
Right.
Like they're a paper towel or a sponge. They're taking all of that in. We consider them highly sensitive persons as well. So you'll hear the term empath and highly sensitive person being used at the same time.